When most people think about the war in Ukraine, they think of one man, Vladimir Putin, a dictator trying to rebuild a lost empire, a war of aggression against a smaller neighbor. That's the dominant story, but there's another explanation, one that doesn't rely on personalities, but on the structure of power itself. And that's what I want to explore today, because this war, in my view, was not born out of madness or ideology, but out of logic. The cold, ruthless logic of international politics. In a world without a global referee, where no one enforces peace, power becomes survival. And when one nation gains power, others feel weaker. That tension, I believe, is what drives conflict. This isn't about morality. It's about structure. It's about how nations behave when they fear for their existence. The modern world operates under an anarchic system, not chaotic, just without a higher authority. The United Nations can pass resolutions, but it can't force powerful countries to obey. So every nation has one ultimate goal: survival. And survival means strength, military, economic, strategic. If a country doesn't look out for itself, it risks extinction. That's the world we actually live in. Not a moral playground, but a competition for security. So when NATO, a military alliance created to contain the Soviet Union, began expanding eastward, Moscow didn't see diplomacy. It saw danger. To Russia, NATO's march toward its borders wasn't just about democracy. It was about encirclement. The common story says Putin invaded because he wants to rebuild the Soviet Union, to create a greater Russia. But if you look at the numbers, that story doesn't fully hold. When the invasion began in February 2022, Russia used around 190,000 troops. Ukraine's landmass is the second largest in Europe, over 600,000 square kilometers. To occupy that entire territory would require 2 to 3 million soldiers. Russia didn't have that, and didn't mobilize anywhere near that number until months later. If this were truly about full conquest, it would have started with overwhelming force. It didn't. And then there's diplomacy. Just weeks into the war, both sides met in Istanbul for peace talks. Ukraine's neutrality was discussed. Russian withdrawal was part of the framework, and Turkey acted as mediator. If Moscow wanted total domination, why even negotiate? Now, none of this justifies the invasion or the suffering that followed, but it reveals something deeper, that this conflict may have more to do with security fears than imperial dreams. And to understand that fear, we have to go back to April 2008. In 2008, NATO declared that Ukraine and Georgia will become members. For Russia, that was the red line. And just months later, it invaded Georgia, a clear warning. But NATO kept expanding. 1999, Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic joined. 2004, 7 more, including the Baltic states, right on Russia's border. By 2020, NATO had 30 members, stretching from Vancouver to Vilnius. To the west, this was about spreading democracy and stability. To Moscow, it looked like being surrounded. It's the same logic the US once used in the Cuban Missile Crisis. When Soviet missiles appeared 90 miles from Florida, Washington was ready to go to nuclear war. So why would anyone expect Moscow to react differently when NATO moved near its borders? Even George Kennan, the architect of America's Cold War policy, warned back in 1998 that expanding NATO would be the most fateful error of American policy in the post-Cold War era. He predicted it would provoke a crisis. And he was right. In early 2022, there might have been a path to peace. Leaked reports suggest that Russia and Ukraine came close to a deal in Istanbul. The terms: Ukraine would remain neutral, Russia would withdraw from most captured areas, and Western weapon shipments would stop. But according to several diplomats, Western powers, especially the US and UK, urged Ukraine not to sign. They believed Ukraine could win militarily with enough support. That moment, many analysts now say, was the last real chance for peace. After that, trust completely collapsed. By mid-2024, the war had caused over 500,000 combined casualties, according to Western estimates. Ukraine's economy had shrunk by 30%, and Russia faced 17,000 international sanctions, the most in human history. And yet, both sides kept fighting, because at this point, it's not just about land. It's about pride, power, and survival. So what would real peace even look like? It wouldn't come from total victory, because total victory in this kind of war is nearly impossible. It would come from compromise. In my view, there are two realistic conditions. 1. Neutrality. Ukraine would not join NATO, staying militarily independent. 2. Territorial negotiation. Russia might retain Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine. To many Ukrainians and Western leaders, that's unacceptable. But the alternative, a prolonged war, carries an even greater risk. Because if Russia starts losing decisively, the chance of nuclear escalation rises. Russia still holds about 5,580 nuclear warheads, the largest stockpile on Earth. Even one small tactical use, not on a city, but as a warning, could rewrite global politics overnight. That's the dark logic of deterrence. You show willingness to go further than anyone else will. Could changing leadership solve this? Unlikely. If Putin were gone tomorrow, the next leader would face the same structural pressures, security fears, domestic expectations, and the same balance of power. In that kind of system, moderation can look like weakness. That's why this war isn't just about one man. It's about the entire system, a system where survival drives decisions. And as both sides double down, the narratives harden. Russia says it's fighting for security. The West says it's defending democracy. Each side believes it's being rational. And that's what makes it so dangerous. So where does this leave us? In today's world, power still rules. Not treaties, not emotions. Nations play a game where the stakes are survival, and there are no referees to stop. Every move by one side feels like a threat to the other. Every defensive step looks offensive. And that's how miscalculations turn into wars. This conflict, at its core, is not just about Ukraine. It's about the structure of global power itself. Until the great powers, the US, Russia, Europe, China, start thinking not as enemies, but as co-survivors, this cycle will repeat. Because in the end, no one wins a nuclear standoff. And if history has taught us anything, it's that when great powers feel cornered, they don't surrender. They strike back. This isn't about blaming or excusing anyone. It's about understanding the logic that drives our world. So maybe, just maybe, we can stop it from repeating. If you're like this video, please share your thoughts in comments, and may God bless you all. Thank you for watching.